The Four Tendencies, coming up with this personality framework, was probably the hardest intellectual thing that I've ever done in my life. I mean,
please welcome Gretchen Rubin.
The Four Tendencies is a framework that divides people into four categories: upholders, questioners, obligers, and rebels. Upholders are people who readily meet outer and inner expectations. They want to know what other people expect from them, but their expectations for themselves are just as important. Then there are questioners. Questioners question all expectations. They tend to love data, justifications, rationale. They love research. They tend to love to customize. They want to optimize. Does this sound familiar to you, Michael?
Quite.
Some people love sleep monitoring. My husband loves sleep monitoring. But for some people, research shows that it gets them sort of like overly focused on whether or not they can get to sleep, and it might actually contribute to insomnia. So you want to be very aware. Is this something that's pushing you in the right direction, or is it kind of making you bonkers? Somebody said, hey, we should follow the 80-20 rule and don't be too rigid, and you shouldn't demonize certain food. And if you try to give up too much, you'll fall off the wagon and everything. But then when he said that, I was like, wait a minute. I could just have none. That would be so much easier. One thing I've learned in happiness is like, don't overlook your body. The body, it's always going to color our emotional and mental experience. And
Gretchen Rubin, welcome to the Augmented Life.
I'm so happy to be talking to you today.
Oh, I'm happy too. I've a longtime fan, so I had a tremendous amount of experience with your work over the years before having you on the show. But then when I knew you were coming on, I did an even deeper dive into approximately everything that you've written.
Oh, wow. That's so nice to hear. Thank you.
It is now a burning question of mine. I know from the Four Tendencies that you think of yourself as an upholder. I want you to know that I think of you as an explainer, like full of enthusiasm, right? For explaining yourself, and like this enthusiasm comes through of just wanting to share with the world and with others, like what you've unpacked to like fully transfer, and the way you are seeing the world. And having just gone through everything that you've written, there's, I think, an amazing thing in your most recent work, starting with Inner Order, but certainly with your most recent work of tremendous restraint in writing in aphorisms. Like, you have to hold yourself back. Did you have to change your process to change in this like fundamental form of output?
Well, it's interesting. That's a great question. So an aphorism, for people who don't know what it is, because a lot of people don't, is a kind of a 1 or 2 sentence general observation about human nature that's attributed to a specific person. So with a proverb, that spoke wisdom, like you can't push a rope, but an aphorism is something where Oscar Wilde said it, or Mark Twain said it, or Emily Dickinson said it, or whatever. Well, it's interesting because in my writing over time, first, I think just kind of unconsciously, subconsciously, and then deliberately, I had been pushing myself to write aphoristically, so that when I had like some big idea that I was developing for paragraphs or pages, I would try to push myself to see if I could distill it into just a sentence or two, just to like have that kind of drop mic moment of just crystallization. And so I had been trying more and more to write that way. And so it had been something, it was a kind of form that I was trying to develop.
Yeah, I gotcha. Right. So you knew, so there was a commitment device here. You're like, I'm going to crush this problem by doing a book of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, more like I love doing this so much I can't stop. And so I've written hundreds and hundreds and maybe thousands of these. Could I turn it into a book? Yeah, more like that.
Oh, that's fantastic. A remarkable feature of this effort is restraint with like emotional weight. Like you're landing hard. It really is something.
Yeah, it's a really interesting form to just try to, there's that old joke. I'm sorry I wrote you such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one. There is something about really forcing yourself to be short and like fit it all in that I think is very powerful.
Yes. All right. Well, all right. Now that sets up another contrast that I want to get into with you, which has to do with a kind of I'll set up this tension, and first of all, just see if you agree. You've certainly written that we manage what we manage what we monitor, um, and that's an important, like, if you want to change your life, you should change what you pay attention to. Um, and I'm surrounded with a bunch of instrumentation, kind of, putting this into practice. I've got my smart watch and I've got my smart ring and I've got a connected scale and connected bed, etc. But I think I think many people see the output of these things as reductive. You've got sleep scores and stress scores, and you can close your ring. Um, and that's altogether different than what you're pointing at with the five senses. What it is there do you find a difference between, let's call it, reductive measurement versus somehow enriching measurement that is helping you actually be embodied in the world as opposed to abstracted into just a number? How how do you manage that tension?
I think this is a good example of the fact that no tool fits every hand, and a tool that works very well for one person might be counterintuitive or counterproductive to another person. So, some people love sleep monitoring. My husband loves sleep monitoring, but for some people, research shows that it gets them sort of like overly focused on whether or not they can get to sleep, and it might actually contribute to insomnia. So, you want to be very aware: is this something that's pushing you in the right direction? Because you're sort of seeing, oh, like if I go to bed earlier, I get more sleep and that's good. Or is it kind of making you bonkers? Same thing with weighing yourself every day. This is something that people who weigh themselves every day tend to maintain their weight more consistently over time. But for some people, it's not a useful tool. It's not a healthy tool. And so I think with every tool, we have to say, like, well, is this actually working for me? Because just because other people say it's working well for them doesn't mean that it's working well for me. And also, we don't need a lot of gadgets and gizmos for a lot of things. They can be useful, but I think a really good thing to look at is look at your schedule, look at your spending, and look at your surroundings. And they will tell you what's important to you and how you're living your life. And, if you look at your spending and you're spending a lot of, money on like food delivery and online gambling, like, is that probably going to make you happier? Maybe not. Or you could say to yourself, well, when I look at my spending, I see that I'm spending a lot on XYZ, and that's exactly what I want to be spending my money on. So I think but I do think that a key to a happier life is self-knowledge, and it can be surprisingly hard to know ourselves. And so sometimes these measurement things help us to understand, what are we actually doing? And I think that can be useful. So both are true. Both are true.
I've been running this experiment with myself that is really about trying to understand who gets the time of my life. And you can get a little bit of this from my calendar. And then another thing that I've been experimenting with actually is about taking the intersection of my location and the rest of my family's location, my wife and kids. So that's now a metric we can look at, which is literally how much time are we spending awake together. It's like a family um, togetherness metric that it was always there, but before it's measured, you just have a really squishy sense, right? Are we spending more or less time over time? Right? The way to get there was not exactly with a gizmo; it was with a little bit of data science on location.
Well, this is points out that one of the dangers of measurement is that you manage what you measure, and you start thinking like, well, if it's measured, it's managed, and you might sort of start driving towards that measurement. And so that could mean that somebody doesn't pay enough attention one-on-one with family members, or a person is sort of like wanting, let's all do something together, and when their children are pushing for independence. And so anyway, it's just, I think again, every tool has to be used thoughtfully and make sure that it's getting you the outcome that you want.
Right, right. Now, broadly, it seems to me like you're on the edge of agency versus over optimization. Like the another way to think about
Ooh,
this,
that's
right?
very well put. Yep, yep, yep.
How do you catch yourself from over optimizing.
Well, I think it's just really making sure what you're measuring and whether it's doing what you want. Like, for instance, as a writer, one thing I very much caution people against is writing to word limits, because it's very, very common for writers to write 1,000 words a day, 2,000 words a day, whatever. But I don't know, as a writer, one problem is padding, which is writing long instead of writing lean and brief. And I know as a writer that it's easier to write long on one idea than it is to write short on one idea and then switch and now talk about a new idea, because it's just easier to sort of like blah, 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 blah. And so I always say to people, this is fine, but if what it's doing is it's just bloating your writing because you're just writing what's easiest because you're trying to get to that limit, that can be very dangerous. Now, on the other hand, I do something similar myself, which is once I have a whole draft, I will pick an arbitrary number out of just like, I'll just pick like 2,700 words today, and I'll go through and I'll be like, I wanted to cut 2,700 words out of my draft without losing any ideas. And I do that because I want to just suck that bloat out, and I do it sort of arbitrarily. And the number there, it really is. I'll just like make up a number that seems auspicious, and then drive toward it. And so again, you'd be like, well, but maybe that would be bad. And in fact, sometimes my writing can get too tight. I can cut down into the muscle because I just love to cut and cut and cut, and then it gets too dense. So again, like I have to be like, okay, I don't want it to feel fluffy, but I also don't want it to be so dense that people are hacking their way through my words. So it's all these tools have to be used wisely. Yeah.
It strikes me that if I was to adopt this, it would actually help me write faster also, because I think, maybe too much pressure on being aphoristic in the first draft, right? Like if you're going to go through and do some cutting, then you can maybe lay down faster. What do you think your ratio is of effort spent on creation versus then that refinement?
I edit a huge amount. So a lot of times when I'm writing, I'm just like writing not I mean, I'll self-edit a lot when I'm doing it, but I am more trying to cover the ground so that I can get through my ideas and then start really, like, making it tighter and more elegant. But for me, with a lot of my books, it's like, where am I gonna talk about a certain idea? Like, sometimes there's an idea where I'm like, "Well, it could be here, it could be there." And so I sort of have to kind of put it in somewhere and then maybe move it around, so it doesn't make sense to really polish something because transitions might change, context might change, timeline might change, and so I'm really trying to lay down that first draft, and then I edit, like, for just endlessly edit.
This push-pull, it happens in software engineering as well. Like you can write for compactness, which will take you more time to produce fewer lines of code, or you can just try to, craft something up and go fast. And there patently is no optimality. There's just opinions.
Right, so it's good to just know that there's more than one way to get it done.
Yeah. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about this is that I think of myself as a hacker. And in hacker culture, we share knowledge. So presentations are really big in hacker culture, and then so is tools. So you want to make a little tool. Sometimes it's a proof of concept, or sometimes it's like a reusable tool, and it's a real gift culture. And I wonder. It certainly, my perspective as a reader is that you are more than just a writer. You are actually also a tool builder. Like I recognize you as a fellow hacker.
Good, good.
Have you thought of yourself this way? Like there's a transition from killer writing to I'm actually making instruments. The Four Tendencies is an insight, but then it's also a tool to help you find yourself. Like you're tool building, right?
No, I didn't think of it in those terms, but that's exactly right, especially with the Four Tendencies quiz and some other quizzes I have, like what's your most neglected sense or habit for happiness. Yeah, those are definitely tools. But even in my writing, I'll be like, are you a book person or a tree person? Are you an opener or a finisher? Are you a juggler or an aerialist? Trying to help people recognize themselves and just with these terms. Yeah.
I've been interviewing a lot of people who are providing tools for better living, literally augmentation, sometimes in a cybernetic sense, sometimes it's just conceptual. And actually a theme of guests is to get away from it seems like when it comes to personalized health and maybe just personalized everything in the future, it's less about the answer and more like figuring out what the right next tactic is for you right now, right? Um, and yeah, that's what I've been getting out of the tool you just name checked there about like, finding your next happiness inducing tactic, right? It's not about living in the perfectly happy way. It's finding the next thing, the next habit to work on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
What was the transition like? Like, did you have to give yourself permission to go from writing a book to writing a tool, especially just the way you like? I would say that the Four Tendencies is such a human insight driven work as opposed it's written from, I think, peering deeply into something that patently we all feel once you've revealed it to us, as opposed to running a, big clinical trial with p-values.
It's scientific the way William James is scientific. Yeah. Like, or, the varieties of religious experience. I would put myself like in that camp
Yes.
of human observers. The Four Tendencies, coming up with this personality framework, was probably the hardest intellectual thing that I've ever done in my life. I mean, I just noticed all these patterns, but like, did they fit together? Was it part of a single pattern? How many variations was it? Like, I had no I just sort of had this dim sense that there was some deep underlying question or issue that would kind of explain all of these oddities that I was seeing and how people could make or break habits. Because it's funny, because in habits, people would be like, "Well, you should do this." And I'm like, "Well, that works, except for all the people for whom it doesn't work. So what about them?" Because a lot of times people will be like, "This is a great thing." And then they just ignore everybody who's left out. And I'm like, "But I want like a comprehensive framework." And so coming up with the Four Tendencies, like I remember just the ecstasy of realizing that my framework was complete and that everything was included and nothing was left out and everything was connected, kind of like a fern frond. I felt like I've always loved the periodic table of the elements, just love it. And I felt like this is like a periodic table of the elements for this aspect of human nature. It was so exciting.
Wow, that's a killer analogy because, of course, Mendeleev figured it out even though there were gaps.
Well, there still are gaps, aren't there? I think there still are some that are not filled in.
Critically, there were like, subatomic number 50 gaps, and those got filled in, which is like brilliant.
No, it just shows like, right. Well, should I explain what the Four Tendencies are since we're talking about it?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay, so the Four Tendencies is a framework that I discovered, that divides people into four categories: upholders, questioners, obligers, and rebels. And it does this by looking at a very narrow but significant aspect of your nature, which is how you respond to expectations, which sounds very boring, but turns out to be really, really juicy. So we all face two kinds of expectations: outer expectations like a work deadline, and inner expectations like I want to keep a New Year's resolution to get more sleep. So depending on whether you meet or resist outer or inner expectations, that's what makes you an upholder, a questioner, an obliger, or a rebel. So in your mind, imagine not like a 2x2, but a Venn diagram of four interlocking circles, like in a diamond shape. Each of these overlap with two. So upholders are people who readily meet outer and inner expectations. They meet the work deadline. They keep the New Year's resolution without much fuss. They want to know what other people expect from them, but their expectations for themselves are just as important. They tend to love schedules, to-do lists, calendars. They don't need a lot of accountability or supervision. They're very focused on execution. Their motto is "Discipline is my freedom." They can be rigid. Then there are questioners. Questioners question all expectations. They'll do something if they think it makes sense. So they're making everything an inner expectation. If it meets their inner standard, they'll do it no problem. If it fails their inner standard, they'll push back. They tend to love data, justifications, rationale. They love research. They tend to love to customize. They want to optimize. Does this sound familiar to you, Michael? They're sometimes told they ask too many questions. They sometimes fall into analysis paralysis because they want perfect information before they make a decision or move forward. And in life, we often don't have perfect information. So their motto is, "I'll comply if you convince me why." Then there are obligers. This is the biggest group for both men and women. This is the one the biggest number of people belong to. Obligers readily meet outer expectations, but they struggle to meet their inner expectations. So these are the people who say, "Why can I keep my promises to other people, but I can't keep my promises to myself?" And it is not a matter of self-care or putting yourself first or setting your priorities. It is a matter of, do you have outer accountability even for an inner expectation? So if you want to exercise more, work out with a trainer, work out with a friend who's annoyed if you don't show up, work out with a dog who's so disappointed and then tears up the furniture, raise money for a charity, think of your duty to your future self, think of your duty to be a role model. There are a million ways to have outer accountability once you know that's what you need. Obligers are great leaders, team members, friends, colleagues, because they're the ones that go the extra mile. I've had employers say they only want to hire obligers because they are the people that go the extra mile. Um, but they can get burned out and they get frustrated because they're not meeting their expectations for themselves. So their motto is, "You can count on me, and I'm counting on you to count on me." And then finally, rebels. This is the smallest group. So rebels, they resist outer and inner expectations. So they do what they want to do in their own way, in their own time. They can do anything they want to do. They can do anything they choose to do. But if you ask or tell them to do something, they are very likely to resist. And typically, they don't tell themselves what to do. Like they don't say, "I'm going to sign up for a Saturday 10 a.m. rowing class," because they think, "Well, I don't know what I'm going to want to do on Saturday." And just the idea that somebody's expecting me to show up is going to bug me. So their motto is, "You can't make me, and neither can I." And if you're thinking to yourself, "I question the validity of this framework," you're probably a questioner. If you were thinking, "I am all four of these equally," that is also a sign of questioner because it means you behave in the way that makes sense in the situation, which is how questioners behave. They think everybody behaves that way. Spoiler alert, they do not. Questioners are the ones who say, "Why should I?" all the time, and other tendencies don't think that way. So, Michael, I have, what do you think you are?
I am unquestionably a questioner.
Yes,
Yeah.
right? Hacking, customization, constant search for efficiency, best practices. That's not I mean, other tendencies do that too because none of us wanna waste our time on things that are arbitrary or don't work. But it is often, it is that always makes me start thinking, "Okay, is this person a questioner?" And the more interested in it they are, the more that you sort of think, maybe it's a questioner who's drawn to that."
Yeah, especially the meta point. The meta point really lands with me, and there's almost a, like, contrapositive. There's a downstream consequence of this kind of thinking is that when I've discovered a breakthrough, the way that I try to convey it is by walking someone through the ways I convinced myself of its validity, because then I just expect that, agreement comes after that.
Yes. Well, it's funny because I do high intensity weight training and my trainer is a questioner and he'll recount like and he'll just tell people over and "I'll give you more research, more data, more information, more studies." And I'm like, "Dude, that's not going to get that person to go to the gym. Like you got
Right.
to send them emails like, 'I'm expecting to see you on Tuesday and I've noticed
Mm.
that you missed 3 weeks.'" And and I even tried to say to him, "I think you should say to people, 'I'll charge you for one session if you come, and if you don't come, I'll charge you triple.'" I'm saying, I
Right.
think some people would take that deal because they want the accountability. They know they need it. But then for like a rebel, that would be the worst. So rebels, they want to be spontaneous. They're like, maybe I'll do it sometimes, maybe I won't.
My friends Danny and Bethany, backgrounds in behavioral economics and mathematics, started an entire business based on this. It's called BeMinder, and you basically create commitment devices by, one way to put it would be betting against yourself, but really it's just incurring financial losses if you derail on your goals.
Yeah, and then there's ones where they donate to a horrible charity in your name. Like, there's all these ways to create these. There's ones where, like, you tend an imaginary plant, and if you don't do what you're supposed to do, the plant dies. It's there are all sorts of this is the same for obligers. I'm like, so many people are obligers. There's all these creative solutions for them once you realize that that is what works for you. And by the way, like, most people know what they are from this brief description. Like, we could do the Game of Thrones characters, we could do The Office. Like, these are very easy to spot. But there is a quiz on my site. If you go to gretchenrubin.com, it's free and it's quick and it gives you like an answer in a report. So just you could take the quiz.
Is it the case that literally millions of people have now taken this instrument?
Yes, millions of people have taken it.
That's fantastic.
But all the people out there who say, "But Gretchen, you say the biggest type is obliger, but aren't you think? But what about selection bias?" And I'm like, "Yes, I know all about selection bias. So I paid for a representative sample to take the quiz, and so I know that obliger is the biggest one. Then it's questioner, rebel is smallest. Upholder, I'm an upholder, only slightly larger. Those are the kind of two fringy, smaller tendencies. But I see this borne out in the world. It's obviously true when you're talking to people. I mean, just think about your own life. You know that not that many people are rebels. They're very noticeable. There are not that many of them. A lot of people are obligers, right? And then a lot of people are questioners. And then you see the upholders like wandering in and out. But there aren't very many of us.
Okay. I must say, I was looking forward to being able to pose the question to you. You predicted rebels are a small percentage, but is there a sample bias there?
Yes. Yeah, because a lot of times rebels are like, why am I going to take this quiz? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't want, I'm not going to do it just because you told me to. But a lot of rebels find it enormously gratifying because, like, the thing about the rebel tendency is it's the most different from the other three. It's the most misunderstood. It's the most badly counseled. And then, like, parents of rebels often get it wrong, teachers of rebels, or rebel parents who don't have rebel children. I mean, it's so for them, it's actually often, or people around rebels. I almost think they are among the people who find the framework the most useful because they understand now the patterns in their own behavior. Because, like, rebels will say, like, I can't make a to-do list because the minute it's on the to-do list, I don't want to do it. People keep telling me to put something on the calendar, but the minute it's on the calendar, I want to skip. It's like, right. That's very typical of rebels. They have all kinds of ways of getting themselves to do what they want to do in a rebel way. So you just need to do it in a rebel way that works for you instead of trying to use these tools. Again, no tool fits every hand. If a to-do list doesn't work for you, do a could-do list. Do a might could list. Do a I could if I wanted to list. Like, there's, have a jar where you write slips, and every once in a while you take out a slip and you do what it says. And if you don't even want to do what it says, you take out another slip. Like, rebels have a million solutions for this. But a lot of times people don't even know, oh, there's another way. I just thought everybody had to use to-do lists, and there's something wrong with me if I can't use them.
Right. Yeah. Putting this in my biohacker way, I would say that the energy cost of finding the tools that will work for you is way lower than trying to change this nearly innate property of yourself. Like, I'm sure you could change.
This is the thing. People say, oh, but I want to change. I'm like, is it even possible? And even if it were, it would be so hard. Why don't you just do things in the way that's right for you? That's so much easier, and you'll get where you want to go. Instead of wishing that you were a different kind of person.
Yes. Now, where the sample bias question leads in a different kind of generalization, which is, of course, when you started, you were classically doing a whole bunch of experiments on yourself. So there you are, a lone experimenter. Now you have this astonishing reach. You have got a big audience. You've got millions of people who are taking your instruments. How does that change your process? Like, does this give you, does the audience give you like a bigger feedback loop that helps in your, let's just say, investigation? You're figuring stuff out, or are you still just kind of a lone experimenter in your head?
No, it's 1,000%. I say, like, the world is my research assistant, and I'll put ideas into the world, and people will give their insights, their observations, their examples, resources, books, like movies, examples. So I love it. It's exposing me to so much more. Like with the Four Tendencies, like, it was just one chapter in my book about habit change. So there's 21 ways to make or break a habit. But afterwards, the people were like, I just want to know more about the Four Tendencies. And they were just flooding me with questions and examples. And what about this? And, and it was just making my understanding of my own framework so much deeper. So that's incredibly valuable. I will say, like, in my starting place is always myself. They say research is me search. And I always start with myself. And I find this really useful because a lot of times, and I don't know if you see this, Michael, but there'll be people who will write whole books and everything sounds extremely plausible. But I'm like, I don't believe for 1 second you've tried any of that, or you've pushed back on that, or you've talked to an actual person, because it all just sounds too neat and tidy. I read a book about somebody about meditation. I'm like, I am not convinced that this person really actually meditates. Because it just was all too easy. It was all exactly, it just felt like exactly what you would predict that somebody would say. And people are messy and things don't work. And like, I remember like one thing, and also it's hard. We just assume that everybody sees the world the way we do, or we assume that because something is true of everybody, it's true for us. And I had an amazing example of this, and this is a very biohacky thing. I have an intensely strong sweet tooth. I've always had just a craving for sweets. And it's so boring to manage. Like, now, later, 2, 3, it's my birthday, it's raining, it smells so good. I resist. Oh, then just one, now it's 2, only half. Anyway, so boring. And then I was reading, I love Samuel Johnson, Dr. Johnson, and I was reading some conversations with him, not even his writing, just like table talk. And there was this anecdote told that Dr. Johnson was at a party and someone asked him if he would take a little wine. And he said, I can't take a little. Moderation is as difficult to me as temperance is as difficult to me as abstinence would be easy. Temperance
Wow.
is as difficult to me as as abstinence would be easy. Sorry, I got tangled up in my Honda. So what he's saying is, it's easy for me to have none, but I can't have just a little.
Right.
And when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, that is me. I could just give up sugar.
Oh, right.
I could just have none.
Right.
That was like 13 years ago.
Nice.
And I don't eat sugar. I don't eat carbs. So like, I don't eat flour. I don't eat rice. I don't eat starchy vegetables. I don't eat fruit. That's where people really think that you're going bonkers, is when you say like, oh no, I don't eat a mango. But it's so amazing because now I have no sweet tooth and all that boring noise just went away. It's been so good for my health. I love everything about it. It's not for everyone. I'm not saying that everybody should give up sugar, because most people don't want to, which is fine. But it is the kind of thing where somebody said, hey, this works for me, and this is an approach you could take, because, in popular culture, I was like, we should follow the 80-20 rule, and don't be too rigid, and you shouldn't demonize certain food. And if you try to give up too much, you'll fall off the wagon and everything. But then when he said that, I was like, wait a minute, I could just have none. And the minute the thought occurred to me, I was like, I felt tremendous relief. I was like, that would be so much easier. And it is, but somebody had to say, like, this is a possibility, because it had never occurred to me that I could just quit. Because a lot of times people will say, well, it isn't possible. And I'm like, well, of course it's possible. You just may not want to do it, which is fine, but you can't say it's not possible.
Yeah, I do feel like I run into exactly this failure mode when I'm explaining certain things that I've worked out, or even giving advice. Like, I just can't shut up about multi-day fasting. I'm so grateful that I tried that first time. I got over my fear. I was like, I'm doing this, and I did it, and it's great. And no amount of enthusiasm about this in front of my friends has convinced very many of my friends to do this. They don't doubt that I do fasting and enjoy it.
Some people use fasting in different ways. Do you mean actually like time limited eating?
I'm drinking water, but otherwise not eating. Yeah.
For how long?
3 to 5 days.
Huh? 3 to 5 days. So you're truly fasting. Okay.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Because sometimes people are like, I fast every day from like 12 to 8. I'm like, that's just limiting your eating. I mean, I don't know that I would call that fasting. That just means like you're not having a midnight snack and you don't eat breakfast. Right. You're actually fasting.
That's right. No, I am in such hard agreement. Like, I honestly feel like there's like I could like there's something wrong with our society when
Yes.
fasting is
That's considered fasting. Yes. You're like, that's called meals. Yes.
yes. You cannot call a system of eating every single day fasting. Come now.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've seen mixed research on this. I've seen difference for men and women, but what I always think is great is like data point of one. Try it yourself. If this sounds like something like I'd be interested in this because some people have amazing results.
Yeah, right. So there is something that maybe this is connected to my tendency. Like once I have the intellectual conviction, there's no willpower, right? It's
That's
just like,
questioner, man. That is it. Once the inner expectation has been met, behavior follows. And this is why if a questioner, and maybe you've encountered this in your audience, if a questioner is stuck, if they're like, I don't understand it, I'm really deeply committed to exercising, yet I kind of can't seem to get going. I'm always like, I bet it's clarity. I bet your questioner self is not truly convinced that you have decided the best way for you to exercise. You still haven't really made up your mind. Should I be doing cardio? Should I be doing high intensity? Maybe I should be doing balance training. Should I be doing interval training? Should I be doing every other day? Should I be running for the marathon? And because you haven't landed in that clarity where you feel like you've answered the questions for you, action is not following in that smooth, almost effortless way that you're saying. So I'm always like, stop, think, research, decide. And if you're in that analysis paralysis, say something like, well, it's not efficient to just not exercising. Let me decide best guess right now, and then I will learn from there. It will work and I'll learn, is this a great tool for me? Do I want to switch tools? I will learn even if it's failing, but it's not efficient to just hold back. To do nothing is less efficient than to do something. So again, that's the questioner idea of efficiency, rationale. But yeah, because there is that feeling of like, once you've made up your mind, it just like, then you're just like, yeah, of course, if I've made up my mind that fasting works for me, I'm going to fast. The CT obligers, this is very mysterious.
Yes, exactly. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they will
They're
just
like,
blink
what the
at me. They're
heck?
like,
Yeah. Like,
you don't seem to be lying, but this does not
yeah,
seem to be a thing I can do. Yes.
exactly. And it isn't something that comes easily to them. And that's why they need outer accountability. That's why they need things like coaches or accountability groups. I've heard of funny things where like two guys that I knew, they would go to the gym together. They wouldn't work out together, but they would just go at the same time. And then when they would leave, they would exchange a shoe. So it's like, oh, Michael, you have to go because if you don't go, I can't work out because you've got my shoe. Right. And so now, or like one person was like, they had like a private gym. So he gave his friend the key to his own gym because he's like, well, now I have to go to my gym because, whatever. So there's all kinds of ways that you can do it once you realize that that's what you need. But see, sometimes upholders and questioners will give, if you don't know about the framework, you can give them bad advice. Like you could say something like, well, I don't want to be your babysitter. You should just do it in the way that's right for you. And it's like, well, that's not good advice for an obliger because they need like, well, what is the accountability? They need some kind of accountability structure.
But yeah, what I often have to do is give myself almost like an excuse to act now and optimize later. Right. Like you just saw me do where I was like,
phrase.
oh, I'll commit to revising in the future, which will allow me to write fast now.
So you don't get stuck in the analysis paralysis phase.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you just like being asked questions? That's a thing. That's not true of all questioners, but many questioners, strangely, they like to teach, but they don't like people asking them questions. It's a very noticeable pattern with some questioners.
Oh, that's interesting. I guess I have some sort of social footing where I feel like all human beings are my fellow figure it outers. So when you question me, I'm not thinking about that being some sort of attack against my authority as an invitation.
Not that kind of question. That's teaching. I mean questions like, where are we going for dinner? What time are we leaving? Did you call your mom?
Oh, yeah.
Just like answering day-to-day questions. Not because you're talking about teaching. Questioners tend to love to teach, but they don't like answering other people's questions. Like if I say to my husband, what are you making for dinner? He'll say food. Where did you make a reservation at a restaurant? I don't know why he just doesn't, but this is like a thing that is very kind of is this very striking pattern because it's because it's so paradoxical among questioners. But that doesn't seem to ring true to you for you. So maybe that's not true for you.
Now that you point it out, I guess like one of the ways that this pattern shows up as an entrepreneur is that I guess I'm going to invest cycles into making good decisions. So anything where the outcome kind of doesn't matter, I'll just push the decision back out. Like no, I'm not going to make up I no, I'm not going to make food decisions, right? As long as food happens, right? I'm not because I guess I'm thinking of every question as being an invitation to come up with the optimal answer, but then that means I have to constrain where I'm going to spend all that CPU power on just high leverage questions.
And do people around you ever resent that?
Probably.
Mm. Mm.
But the fact is, so wow, okay. Yeah, so we're going to get into like some startup management theory for a second. So I have noticed that a lot of solicitousness is actually a strategy to get out of work, right? So like I want you to make the decision, right? Like bringing it to me isn't like a gift to me. That's actually transferring the work to me, and you need to.
I call this like in my secret of adulthood, it's do you need more time or do you need to make a decision? And one of the ways people stall for time is they're like, I need to consult with somebody. But I think you're right. A lot of times they're hoping, well, maybe somebody else will just sort of like lift this out of my hands.
Right. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Wow. I ask a very similar question, which is like, what is it about time that is going to make this decision easier or better in the future? Right. Like time itself is not an input at all.
Yeah. In fact, it can be negative because some decisions get made by time, but just by the mere passage of time. And so you've made a decision by not deciding, when pretending that you're not deciding.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What experiments are you running now? That do you have any preliminary takes on the effect of the 25 and 25 cohort?
Oh, yeah, people love this. We've been doing it for a couple of years. This is something that we do on the Happier podcast where tied to the year, we make a list of like 24 things we want to do or 25 things we want to do. And this is really fun. One of the things is like sometimes both my sister and I, my sister's my co-host, there'll be things that take years. Like you have to put it on there year after year. My sister did not have a will until like this year. I know it was bananas, right? And she put it on the list and finally it got done. So, sometimes it's good to just keep so that you just keep it in your sight that it's something that really is really important. Um and no, and I think I love a New Year's resolution. And I love that framework of kind of it's a catalyst for reflection every year. But some people don't like that. And something like this can feel more playful. Sometimes people have categories, like they might have 5 for adventure and 5 for family and 5 for work and 5 for health, something like that. Or the whole thing could be themed, like travel, and you put 25 things that you want, or like hiking, and it's 25 things related to hiking. So I think part of it is the creative fun that people have sort of to tailor this kind of tool, the 25 for 25 tool to suit themselves and what they want. But just anything I think that makes us stop and say, what would make my life happier? That's within my conscious thoughts and actions that I can do as part of my ordinary day without like quitting my job and moving across the world. It's just, we're so much more likely to do those things if we think about them. And so often people do something that makes them so happy, which they could have done at any time. But something that can be done at any time is often done at no time, and putting it on the list makes sure, okay, well, I'm going to try to do it by December 31st. And and then it's just very satisfying to like cross it off the list as well.
I've been making a conscious practice of seeking out the feeling of awe, and instead of just like letting awe happen, I'm like, nope. We're gonna be an awe-seeking family. But what does that mean, right? Like how do we translate that into action is just almost like a fun brainstorming exercise. But the forcing function is it's about asking the question, like, how are we going to seek awe?
Mhm. I visit the Metropolitan Museum every day, and I feel like that's a good way to that's kind of a way that I don't have awe every time, but I have awe a lot of times.
I realized late-ish in life, I realized in my 40s that I all every like many of the things that we're talking about, um, seeking out happiness, optimizing my life, I was approaching in this real intellectual way. I saw myself as a brain on a little stick figure body, and the purpose of the stick figure body was to like move my brain around, and it's the brain that's doing everything. Right? Um, and so I'm like in the process even now of becoming more embodied, like realizing that sensory input is a thing that I need to consciously tune into. And similarly, of course, there's this arc in your work culminating in an extraordinary book on the topic.
Yes. No, the metaphor I use is that I was the my body was the car that my brain was driving around. Yes, right. Yeah. No, and I completely agree. For some people, I think it comes back very naturally to dial into their senses, but I think that for some of us, it takes a lot of like very, very conscious practice. Well, and in fact, one of the quizzes, again, if you love a quiz on my site, is what's your most neglected sense? Because what's interesting is almost everybody has like a sense or two that they really love and that they turn to for comfort and pleasure, and they love adventures and they're trying to learn about it and they talk about it with other people and they share experiences with other people. But then there's ones that you kinda neglect, and that's really a useful thing to know because that's where you have low-hanging fruit because you're having all your fun with your appreciated sense, but when you know your neglected sense, it's like, well, what could how could I use this sense for more comfort and pleasure, and how could I use it to connect with other people or have adventures or and so that's a super fun quiz to find out what's your most neglected sense, and it's funny because when I did it, I thought about, like, your idea your question about, like, do I learn from my own tools? I thought that basically no one would have sight as their most neglected sense because we're wired for sight, and it's a huge part of the brain, and what I found is that it's, like, surprisingly evenly distributed among the 5, and the thing about sight is everybody uses it for utility, but people don't use it for pleasure and comfort and fun and adventure, and even people you like, I remember talking to, like, a movie producer who said, "I use sight all the time in my work, but when I'm like, for pleasure, I have it's music. I play music, like, shut my eyes and I listen to music. I love sound baths." Like, her most appreciated sense was hearing. Now my least my mo le most neglected sense is taste, which is probably one of the reasons that it's easy for me to give up sugar because in the end, I'm not much of a foodie, right? Like, I have a really strong sweet tooth that I really don't care that much about food and taste. That was my neglected sense, but even for someone like me, I found all these ways to bring it into my life. So it's interesting, it's pretty evenly distributed. If you had to guess, Michael, what do you think your most neglected sense is? What are you least interested in? Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching.
Well, okay. Um, perhaps this will reveal the depth of my research. I think it is the case that you had a working title before the final title that was something like the 10 senses. Is that right?
Yeah, well, yes, because I was gonna count all the other yeah, all the yeah, there's a lot of
Right?
other senses, right? Yes.
Yes.
These are the 5 glamorous senses. These are the ones we talk about and, like, little kids know about. Like, the other ones, those are more like they're running under our consciousness, right? Where they're not within our conscious control, and we really only notice them if something goes wrong. So they seem very different.
Well, I want to cheat with my answer because it is interoception that I've been neglecting. And I I'm a longtime meditator, but in this very at first, when in the early days when I started meditating as a teenager, it was in this very dry kind of intellectual tradition. It was very there's an object to your attention. It's a concentrative practice, and this really helped me with pain management. I had a cluster headache problem for decades, and the there's absolutely no question that the Theravada tradition of meditation that I had stumbled into really helped, but it almost accelerated my disembodiedness and and it's only this decade in my 40s that I've learned some Tibetan meditations and discovered how emotions are these really embodied feelings. I mean, it was always happening. I just didn't notice.
So you didn't notice like, oh, I have butterflies in my stomach, or my knees are shaking, or I feel like I've got like something is in the pit of my stomach, or you didn't experience that kind of physical feedback on your emotions.
I was at war with them. So
Mm.
so so my
Mm.
relationship with butterflies in the stomach was that if I wasn't careful, that would distract me from the important intellectual
Ah,
capabilities of this brain.
interesting.
So I was thinking of interoception as perhaps like
A distraction.
like pain, right? Like one of those things that's sort of getting in the way of me, solving problems with math or whatever.
Mhm, and that the body had to be tamed and silenced so
Yes.
that the mind could have a kind of a
Yes.
purely, like, focused and, not distracted, yeah. No, I mean, if there's one thing I've learned in happiness, it's like, don't overlook your body. The body is, it's always gonna color our emotional and mental experience, and things it's funny, people grope for these very fringe solutions to things, rare, minerals that they need to take, and, no, it's like, it's just but I'm like, "Are you doing the basics? Do you get enough sleep? Do you get movement? Do you get light in the morning?" Uh, research is coming to grips with caffeine. Turns out it's pretty good for you, or it's, or at least mixed, and, start with those things, and then you can and so many people, they don't do the basics.
Jump straight to the peptides and the toad venom.
Oh, yeah, it's just some, ankle bracelet of bronze that's gonna, realign their whatever. Yeah, it's just like the basics. Yeah, the real basics.
Now that I've been working on this interoception, I would say I have this pet theory that um these embodied intuitions are evolutionarily older than like the part of the brain that's thinking in words. And it really is the the evolved decision guidance system of mammals. So there's a signal there. We had Cassie Kozyrkov off. She was on the show. She was Google's first chief decision officer, and you know she literally trains decision making mathematical models. And her major lesson was feelings are data. Not all
Um,
data comes from calculators. Yeah, like it's
right.
okay to tune into this stuff. Yeah, that really helped me. So I'm still on this journey. I think of paying attention to what's going on up and down the spine.
Mhm. Right. Yeah.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation where we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about a lot of your instruments, including some of the quizzes. How do people find those and learn more about your work?
So on my site, gretchenrubin.com, there are all the quizzes, those quizzes, and then other quizzes that are all free and super fun, I think. And then I have a podcast, Happier with Gretchen Rubin, which is a podcast that I do with my sister, and it's all about very practical ways to make yourself happier, using science, ancient wisdom, pop culture, our own experiences. I have a Substack called Secrets of Adulthood. That's like kind of teaching stories, if you like a teaching story. I have my regular newsletter that's called Five Things Making Me Happy, which is exactly what it sounds like, Five Things Making Me Happy. I'm all over social media. As you can tell, I love to engage with people because the world is my research assistant. I love to hear other people's ideas, and as I, work through my latest conclusions. So yeah, I'm in all the places just under my name, Gretchen Rubin.
And you've also published some fabulous books, which I have.
And I've written 11 books. Yes, which is my favorite thing. That is my core identity is as a book writer, and there's a ton of stuff about all my books and excerpts and audio excerpts and everything like that on my site as well.
I'm one of those who likes the printed form. And
Me too. Give
yeah,
me a book
yeah,
every single time.
right. Yeah, yeah. And I've even enjoyed the kind of workbook formats that you've put together. It's helped me out.
Oh,
So
thank
yeah,
you.
thank
That's
you.
fun. Well,
Yeah.
we're interested in all the same things. I'm so happy we got a chance to have this conversation.
It's the same. Thank you very much.